in American history. You have a Trump campaign associate. His name is Carter Page. He was spied on during the height of the 2016 election by Barack Hussein Obama's DOJ through the use of a FISA warrant, the hardest warrant to get. And tonight we know for sure, totally confirmed, that the justification for this warrant was a document. You've heard it before. The unverified, uncorroborated, phony dossier put together by a foreign national with funneled money through a law firm to an op research group paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. And by the way, this was all full of Russian lies. The whole bunch of it. Russian lies. Every single thing that they said about Donald Trump was not true. Now, we told you about Perkins Coie, the law firm. We told you about Fusion GPS. We told you about the foreign national, Christopher Steele. They dug up dirt on Clinton's opponent with Russian lies. Let me repeat, Mr. Mueller, Russian lies to the American people to affect the outcome of a presidential election. Let me put it more simply. Obama's DOJ and FBI were spying on the campaign of an opposing party in a presidential election year, using op research that Hillary Clinton paid for. Deep state operatives tried to rig and steal a presidential election. This is what happens in banana republics. This is Venezuela. The type of propaganda would rival Pravda in the former Soviet Union. This should never happen in the United States of America, period. And the mainstream corrupt media in this country has been completely missing in action. Make no mistake, this phony, dirty Russian dossier wasn't just referenced in the newly released documents on late Saturday night. Instead, Steele's dossier was, in fact, the FISA application. All four of them. But still, look at your screen. See these names? James Comey, Sally Yates, Dana Puente, and Andrew McCabe, Rod Rosenstein, all signed off on this warrant, and all three subsequent renewals. They repeatedly lied to FISA court judges 4 separate times. Rod Rosenstein lied. McCabe lied. Nothing new for him. And Yates and Comey and the rest of them all lied.
So the Clinton campaign, of course, learned about it from Christopher Steele, whom they were paying to gather this dossier. And it's my understanding, too, from the testimony in recent months that Steele never visited Russia, never bothered to go to Russia as he assembled this dossier. Is that correct?
That's my understanding as well. And, you know, there's a number of lawsuits going on, and Mr. Gubarev down in Southern District of Florida. So hopefully these civil, yes, I know. Hopefully these civil cases can get to the bottom of this. And, you know, it's
but
great.
Yet at the same time, now we learn that in October of 2016, really at the height of the intensity of the presidential campaign, Christopher Steele, on the payroll of the Clinton campaign, briefs officials at the State Department. And that briefing apparently was used as one of the pretexts for spying on you. Am I connecting those dots correctly?
That's my understanding, Tucker. And, you know, just based on this, these 400-plus pages of documents, you know, there's a lot in there about media. You know, it's sort of quoting a lot of media sources. And, you know, I've talked with a couple of former assistant U.S. attorneys, et cetera, and no one has ever heard of anything like this in terms of this type of a court filing. It's just absolutely preposterous in terms of their sources. So,
one of the reasons I find this story so fascinating is because you are an actual person, an American, a Naval Academy graduate, and you're willing to talk in public. It's amazing to me that you have been the target of this surveillance and lived to tell the tale. You're not being charged, as you said, and I think you're probably right. What has it done to your life? How do you feel knowing that the federal government was spying on your personal life for a year?
Tucker, it's absolutely outrageous, but I have to say I'm very happy to have gotten the finally, you know, 14 months later, the FBI answered my FOIA requests. This weekend, we started having a little bit of transparency. Obviously, there's 100-plus pages of blacked out information, and I think, you know, it's just starting the process in terms of getting to the real truth of these crimes that were committed against American democracy with this abusive process in the FISA court. So,
but really committed against you. I mean, your government, on the basis of no actual evidence, has accused you of treason and spied on you as a result. I mean, how does that, as someone who served your country in the military as a naval officer, how does that make you feel?
Well, my bigger concern is, you know, there's obviously big problems in the U.S. Department of Justice. There are these false court pleadings, you know, the false court pleadings that U.S. Attorney Berman has put in terms of my civil case against Broadcasting Board of Governors. But the bigger issue, which is my bigger concern, is the complete failure of the U.S. intelligence community in terms of looking at this Russia issue. If this is what they're using...
Well, it sounds like they succeeded, actually. I don't know if it's a failure. They had a very specific goal in mind, and they've achieved it. That's why we're talking about it today. They've hamstrung the workings of government for a year and a half. Carter Page, you're a lot more forgiving than I would be in your position. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Tucker.
Are those the norms that allowed China to go virtually unchecked for almost 2 decades? Or the diplomatic norms that thought that Iraq was an essential war? Or is it when we looked into Putin's eyes and saw his soul? The fact is, many of the same people trashing Trump's disruptive approach were the same ones who advocated the most disastrous policies of the post-Cold War era. Of course, as long as they hit the president, they're still going to get cushy gigs at the New York Times or that Amazon paper. And they'll also get pundit perches at other cable outlets. In other words, they get total immunity for being perpetually wrong on critical issues. The good thing is, Americans, both on the left and the right, continue to reject the old norms that led to job losses, flatlining paychecks, offshoring our manufacturing, and disastrous military interventions. President Trump has stood up to China with tough tariffs, while slapping severe sanctions on Putin and also Kim Jong-un. And now he's standing up at a moment of social and economic instability for the regime in Iran. Typically, his all-caps tweet advising the Iranian president to never, ever threaten the United States again. I was coming back from a trip yesterday. I was like, whoa, it's all caps. It was greeted with the same snark and skepticism of so many of his global initiatives. Well, the difference this time, though, is there seems to be coordinated communications at play, a strategy, something the White House, I think, has long needed. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton each sent out messages echoing the president's Iranian stance. Now, this is a radically different approach from the mixed messaging that followed the Helsinki summit. We talked about this last week. But while he shakes the old global order, Trump is also rattling the cages of the intel community. Cages that no one has ever dared to rattle. Remember during the campaign when Trump spoke about reforming and ending the corruption at the FBI and the CIA? Even his political nemesis sounded a warning.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
And boy, have they worked to get back at him. And we now know that the unverified Oppo research used to secure those FISA warrants to spy on an American, and the FISA judges, by the way, weren't told that Hillary specifically funded it. Then, of course, we know that rogue FBI investigators use their powers as an insurance policy should Trump actually be elected. Meanwhile, some Obama-era intel officials responsible for so much of the deep state mischief have become the critics-in-chief. And today, the White House announced the president's intention to strip them of their security clearances, including former CIA chief John Brennan, who last week called the president's Helsinki comments oh so subtly treasonous.
Not only is the president looking to take away Brennan's security clearance, he's also looking into the clearances of Comey, Clapper, Hayden, Rice, and McCabe. The president is exploring the mechanisms to remove security clearance because they've politicized and in some cases monetized their public service and security clearances.
Okay, well, a couple of them don't even have their security clearances any longer. It's good to check that before you go out there and say that. However, this disturbing episode, I think it does require more than security clearance revocations. It's bigger than that. It's about the credibility of the people who are heading up our intelligence agencies and their inherent political biases. The president should be encouraged to continue disrupting on behalf of the American people, at home and abroad. Contrary to the media narrative, a new poll shows that voters are with Trump. A new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll taken before and after the Russian summit reveals that the president's job approval rating is up a point since last month to 45%, a high for his presidency. Imagine if we had a fair media. Among Republicans, the Trump has an 88% approval rating. Other than, I guess, George W. Bush after 9/11, that's a higher intra-party rating than every president since World War II. Now, President Trump is on the right path, but he must proceed cautiously and react deliberatively, always keeping the focus on the American people. They're the ones who elected him. The resistance will seize on missteps in communication or approach or in policy as proof that they were right all along. You got to leave it to the experts, Mr. Trump. But by all means, continue exposing Washington corruption and those who profit handsomely from it. That's the most enjoyable disruption of all. And that's the angle.